So here with us today on episode 4 of the talk, we have Masa Valkanou, who's a family psychotherapist at Thrive, and we have Dr. Catherine Frogley, who's a clinical psychologist at Lighthouse Arabia. Welcome, ladies, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So mental health is such an important topic, and I think the more emphasis and focus has been put on it in the media, in particular in recent months. But with everything that's going on at the moment, I think it's coming, under the spotlight, and people are worried, especially with parents being at home with their children all the time, and worried about the long-term effects of things like lockdown and being away from their children being away from their friends and not doing sport and things like that. Are you seeing an increase in the number of patients, or are your current patients, are they sort of doing more appointments and fitting in more time to see you? Marsha, I don't know if you want to just answer that question maybe.
Actually, there is one little contradiction in the trend. So people who are usually having troubles with mental health issue, and they usually have bigger anxiety or depression, in this kind of circumstances, when everything is so chaotic, so the chaos that was inside of them suddenly gets externalized, and everybody are suffering from some form of worry and anxiety. So maybe there is even a tendency for them to feel calmer in this period of time. So to put on hold their usual response. While on the other hand, people who were maybe handling things and were highly functional, but now with this additional stress and anxiety, they are starting to breaking up. So they will start to call for help in this period. Anyway, I don't know for you, Kat, but we are full and we are fully functional online. So our therapy is very available, and it's working very well. Online therapy works very well. So we are full actually with people. We are trying to give as much support as we can. And I will even expect that this trend will be even bigger when things start to get back to normal, because then people will relax, and with relaxation, the whole anxiety will come up again, because we are like in adrenaline response. We are like, holding our muscles tight. And when the pain will come, when when the muscles start to cool down. Yeah. So I'm expecting actually the jump.
I guess that makes sense, that when we first went into lockdown, the fears were over not being able to do lots of things. But now we're kind of looking at it the other way, and we're thinking, are we ready to go back out there? Is it safe? What do you think, Dr. Catherine?
I would agree with a lot of what Marsha said, and I think in any type of crisis, there are different phases that we go through. So initially there was this phase of uncertainty and worry because everything suddenly changed overnight, and we all had to adapt, children, adolescents and parents, we all suddenly had to adapt to, doing everything from our homes. And then we move into, we've kind of adapted to that now, but we're processing all of the losses that's associated with that. So we move into more of a, particularly for teens, I would say, there's more of a depression, almost a loss of a grief that we're going through, when we realize that, we're in this new normal, and something we're not able to do the normal things that we would like to be able to do. And now we're having to think about the future and going back and what we feel about that. And there's a new wave of anxiety about going back. So there are different phases that we're seeing, and I think that affects people in different ways. But just as Marsha said at Thrive, we are full at the moment, and we are trying to give as much support online to the community through talks, through kind of being at places like this today, and trying as much as possible to be available to people. And just as Marsha said as well, that we will be expecting that once we start to go back, I'm already having lots of families asking about, how how will my child, go back outside into the world again? How will they go back to nursery or go back to school? Teens who are contemplating starting a new school, possibly online, maybe going in person. So there's lots of these changes that we're having to contemplate and make sense of coming as well.
Yeah, and I think it's such a huge topic, and under that umbrella you've got so many different facets and so many individuals who are being affected in a different way. Like, so you've got the teens, you've got the children who are going from year 6 to secondary, you've got parents worried about their sort of younger children who are missing out on sort of key milestones in their education, like phonics and stuff, say for FS2. You've got parents who are wanting to get their kids back to school. You've got parents who aren't wanting their kids to go back to school. There's such a massive sort of spectrum of anxiety out there. I think one of the key things that we've had parents ask is, long term, what sort of effects is this being away from friends, school being closed, lack of sports facilities going to have on our children? I guess that's teens and sort of little ones as well. I don't know, Masha, if you want to start with that one.
I think the main factor for containing little children, from babies, toddlers to like primary school children, is how a parent is handling this situation. So if Kate, actually, we had the same article, we were commenting on this already. But if a parent is a good container for anxiety, for fears, for everything that is going on with the child will not be actually affected so much, because little children cannot follow the news, they cannot comprehend what is actually happening. So for them, they're just tracing the face of their parent. If the parent is calm, if the parent is digesting the psychological difficulty very well, then there is no consequence for a little child. While when we talk about teenagers and adolescents, it's a whole different story, because they are very exposed. They can read news, they can get worried, and the teenage years and adolescence by itself is bringing a lot on display. They are already facing so much, and they can't turn to their parents for support because their developmental stage doesn't allow them to connect with parents, with primary caregivers. So they're already switching to their friends and the company for the comfort. And now this company is taken away from them. So they are, I mean, you have online interactions, but they are not the same quality. The teenager has to feel in a herd, he has to feel the group, he has to have this dynamic of 10,000 things going daily in his class. So this is, the online thing is just a very poor settlement for that. So I think teenagers are really, really like going through a sad phase now. And especially if we are talking about the final year, they will not have the prom, they will not have the celebration. And this celebration is not only having a function to enjoy and to have a good time, it is having a very important cultural and sociological function of actually overcoming your sadness for ending an era.
Yeah, it's that finality, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So like the things we do around this time, how we celebrate the ending, is actually helping psychologically to overcome the sadness of the ending, the actual ending. So they're deprived of all of that. It's
and you mentioned about parents sort of being able to keep their anxieties inside to sort of ensure that their littler children don't get those same anxieties. Catherine, how does a parent do that? Because obviously we're all anxious as well. Any advice on how we can be the parent who does not subject our children to all those external anxieties that we may be feeling?
This is such a big part of any work that I do with a family, and actually you know, looking after the parent is the most important job when it comes to looking after children, because just as Marsha said, they're looking to you, they're reading everything about your face, they're very sensory. So even if you're saying, don't worry, darling, it's fine, but you've got a look of worry and concern and you're tense and they're watching your behavior, they're picking up on those sensory cues that tell them that things are not right in the house at the moment. And whilst it's important that, you know, parents will be feeling anxious, of course, you're a human being, there is a lot to be dealing with. It's not about denying those feelings that you're having, but it's about building your own resilience and your ability to look after yourself and regulate those feelings. So it's about developing that self-awareness and thinking, you know, having that time to check in with yourself and say, how am I doing today? You know, am I finding homeschooling really, really hard today? Do I need to take a little bit of a break? Do I need to speak to my partner and just say, can you start the morning off? I just need to have a little walk around the garden, or I just need to have a cup of tea by myself in the bedroom just for 5 minutes, just to ground myself, just to bring myself, you know, to a place where I'm able to regulate my feelings. Because the parents are the containers for children's feelings, particularly for younger children. They don't have a fully formed frontal cortex, frontal lobe, that part of their brain that helps them to regulate, until, you know, neuroscience tells us until 24, but particularly around adolescence and under 3. So they're really looking to parents to be that surrogate frontal lobe for them. And that means we need to fill ourselves up a little bit more to make space for children's feelings and emotions around what's going on. So the best advice is to, you know, to reflect on yourself, to think about how you are feeling. You can do that through journaling, through meditation, through compassionate work on yourself, you know, listening to that inner critic and being self-compassionate, speaking to friends, or if you need to, through therapy as well.
I think that's key. Obviously, we're not used to having our children around 24/7. Either we're going to the office to get our me time and have a hot cup of coffee, or go to the loo by ourselves, or we're, you know, even if we're not working, we're going to the gym, we're having coffee with friends. All of that has gone, and we're around our children 24/7. And much as we love them, it's really hard. So yeah, I think the finding the me time is lovely, and we all need to be doing it, but it's quite a tough one. And I think if you've got multiple children as well, how do you find, or should you make the time to sort of spend time individually with each one? Is that quite important as well for their mental health? Masha? Oh, yes, sir. Yep. No, go.
Oh, I was going to say, well, firstly, you know, that me time that you mentioned, and I hear you saying, you know, it's so hard, isn't it, to find that me time when, you know, there are usual transitions in the day. You know, even just putting them into the car and walking around and having that moment of peace.
Holiday, yeah.
You know, just you put them in the car, you just have a minute just to walk around the outside of the car. That's a break.
I was trying to explain that to my husband just recently. I was like, do you get that feeling? You put them in their car seats, you shut the door, and you're like, and it's like, breathe.
It is. It's a moment just to yourself of quiet, where you those little moments add up, and we're not getting those little moments at the moment. So I think that's important. You know, we're not asking you to kind of build in lots and lots of time where you are sitting for yourself, because that's just not realistic right now. But it is about having a small window of time where you do prioritize that. Actually, you know, I need to check in with myself. I need 5 minutes of time to myself, and using the support around you to do that. But also the way that you speak to yourself, the compassion that you give to yourself, that inner voice that you have, just using that compassion and kindness can also be helpful. So simply saying, this is hard today, and reminding yourself that lots of people are finding it really, really hard. And it's okay, you know, to forgive myself for making a mistake earlier is also a really important way in which you can build your emotional resilience at this time.
That's very interesting. So I think there's a definite today will be better every morning, especially with the home learning. I find myself wake up every morning and it's like, okay, today I'm going to hold it together. say it, we're going to do it, it's all going to be lovely, we're going to get it all done by 2. And then, there are chinks in the armour, and we've got children crying and mummies crying.
And when that happens, it's about saying, okay, this did not go to plan. It's all right that this is not going how I wanted it to be. This is a tough gig right now. This is really, really hard. And I can just, remind myself that there are lots of people who are also finding this hard. I'm not alone. And tomorrow will be a new day.
Exactly. Tomorrow will be a new day is the mantra. And Marsha, what about children? Catherine has said about the frontal lobe not developing, and you do see, I know that older children can probably express themselves a little bit more, and teenagers in particular is probably door slamming and it's not fair, and they're quite vocal with how they feel, so it's quite obvious to see that they're unhappy maybe. But with the littler ones, you can think that they're fine, and then all of a sudden they'll have the biggest temper tantrum over something totally bizarre that there's no rational thought or explanation for it. And how do parents deal with that? What should we be watching out for? What signs that our little children are maybe anxious, upset, worried?
Well, actually, this time gave us a possibility to really be with each other. So, of course, we should expect a lot of tantrums and emotional discharge, and that is all perfectly fine. But also, I expect that parents in this time will have an opportunity to actually see if there is something really worrying about their children, or maybe some symptoms that they should pay attention to. So I would say that everything that happens once or twice or 3 times, it's not something that you should be really paying attention, like worrying about. But real symptomatology cannot just go away. So these will be the patterns that will always come back and that will really be there. What is important is that you don't get assimilate to these. So if your child is washing their hands very promptly and intensively, just not swipe it away like, okay, I don't see this, this is too complicated now to take into account, but to be brave to just notice and maybe discuss and then take action. So if you have something sporadically happening, that's perfectly fine. But if you have some new formed habits that look a little bit strange to you, or you feel some kind of tension that you never felt before, wait for a little, pay attention, give it some attention, and then if it persists, then I would certainly encourage you to ask for help, because coming to therapy is not only when you have a problem, it's a fantastic developmental experience for everybody. I'm really thinking that the therapy is an opportunity that everybody should use.
I think that's key, and I think that's definitely worth sort of highlighting that, don't wait until you start to see a symptom. It should be something that we should all be doing. I'm going to touch on the big bad ogre of current parenting, which is iPads and screen time. There is a tendency, I know, for children to bury their heads in iPads once they finish their homeschooling, and obviously during their homeschooling a lot of them are on their iPads anyway. Working parents sort of trying to get their own stuff done, leave them to their own devices because they're quiet, not fighting. Should we be worried about that, and should we be sort of having our strict iPad limits at this time, or should we be saying, don't worry, it's actually only a short period of time, we're going to come out at the other side and then they'll get back into their sport and it'll be fine? Or should we be actually being a bit more strict?
I would like to really take this opportunity to very seriously warn the parents about this. Because what is happening is that more and more children have developmental disorders. So we have a serious rise in dyslexia, dyscalculia, speech problems, which is very problematic. So I can ask you why. Living standard is better, education is more available. So why do our children having more and more learning disabilities? And we are not talking about children who are coming from some maybe not so fortunate sociological background. we are talking about children from rich families, children from Dubai, which have every opportunity to have a very good education, family where education is cherished. But what we see worldwide now is that developmental or learning disabilities are already around 10% of children's population. That is huge. That is like epidemic. So just for you to have a scale of it, like mental disorders, if they are like genetic caused or some just environmental, accidental opportunity, something happened there, then we have mental disorders. They're around 2% of population. So when we are speaking about 10%, that means that we are systematically doing something wrong. So we have to pause here and think, what are we doing wrong with our children? Research is also showing in the last 15 years that each generation of children generally shows poorer results in school capabilities, like motor skills, vocabulary, general knowledge, logical, mathematical capabilities. We now have one very good program in Serbia. Dr. Ranko Rajović developed a program that is called Nikola Tesla Center, program for developing children capabilities and intelligence. And this program is exactly working on new ways of learning that is very in accordance to child physiological brain development. So what I want to say is that our brain is economical machine. So the skills that are matter to you will be developed more, and the neurological pathways that you don't use will simply go in, we can say, atrophy. So if, for example, you have an example with a kitten. So if you put a patch on the kitten's eye in certain sensitive period, after only 3 days, the kitten will actually go blind for its life. So in order for our children to develop, we need to have stimuli from the environment for the babies to start to develop their brain properly and for children to continue this development. So what happened previously is that nature took care of this. So children were jumping, they were throwing balls, they were playing marbles, they were developing their eye-hand coordination, their motor skills, their fine-tuning, all these skills that are essential for cognitive development. And nowadays, you have a child who is having the screen in front of it, so the body is still. When the body is still, the child brain cannot develop properly. So some neurological pathways are actually dying in this process. And then the parents are coming to me and they're saying, my child cannot sit still. My child cannot hold information, has no frustration tolerance, has no patience, has only emotional outbursts. But we have to understand that your child is trained to have this for a few hours per day, because iPad games and screens are teaching the very frequent attention jump. So your child is learning how to not have patience, how to not have attention for certain for certain things that are just sine qua non for learning and for cognitive development. So in that terms, it is really, we can say it is a catastrophe what screens are doing to our child's brain development. And our brain can get affected, we can notice it, but developing brain is something that we cannot reverse that damage afterwards. So instead of learning how to be still and how to have some images that are very rapid and how not to have patience, let's learn social skills, let's learn emotional intelligence, let's develop cognitive capacities in this time. I'm sorry, it took too long. But
no,
you know what? It's extremely important for parents to realize the dependence and everything that is happening while the child is watching the screen.
It's extremely important, and as you say, there were some very worrying figures there. And I think, you know, with the little ones, you think, well, they're on an educational app, so it's fine. But what you're saying is actually, no, it's not really fine. And with the little ones, I guess it's, I don't know, they have a temper tantrum if you take their iPads off them, but you can actually take them off them, put them on a fridge, and they will eventually, I don't know, I'm talking about mine, they will find something else to do, and actually they're quite good at playing by themselves, during a bit of fighting, but on the whole. But with the older ones, I would imagine it's a bit harder. And at what sort of age is it okay to let them have the freedom of screens, or is there no age? Should we be monitoring it right through their sort of school life?
I think, given what we've said about the frontal lobe developing not fully until approximately the age of 25, it's a very difficult question to answer. When should children be free to make any kind of decisions where, you know, their brain isn't fully formed? But of course, we have these markers of age. We have 18, we have, you know, 21 in certain countries where they are classified as an adult. So it's a very difficult question to answer, and I think it's an individual decision based on your adolescent and what they're capable of being able to manage for themselves. It's a question and something I discuss with parents and teenagers all the time, and it's often a kind of compromise or a negotiation between the two of them, because for, you know, an older adolescent, it's a very important way for them to develop social networks. And yet we also have to consider that their exposure to social media, to increase screen time, they are not fully yet able to regulate that, to stop that, to know the long-term effects of that, because their brain isn't fully formed to be able to consider those types of, you know, things that we as adults can. So it's based on the individual. It's based on the adolescent in front of you, what they can handle, what they're able to manage for themselves. So sometimes with teenagers, I would kind of set up a bit of an experiment with parents and with teenagers and say, look, let's give them access to this for a week, and let's see if they can bring it to you at this time to put it away for bed, for example. And let's see if independently they are able to manage that. And if they can, then great, we've built that trust where we can give them a bit of responsibility around that. But if you see that actually they're spending a lot of time on their phone, they're not able to regulate and put it away because it's very addictive, then perhaps we need to step in as adults and say, look, this is the time for technology. This is the time where we are all technology free. And I think the other important thing to remember is that children will do as they see, not as we say. So if they see that adults in the house are on their phones, using screens all the time, and we live our life through various different screens, especially right now, then it's going to feel like a bit of a hypocrisy in the house that, you know, they are not allowed it, but we are. So we have to model that to them, and we have to say, right, the whole family is having screen-free time every evening from 5 o'clock onwards, or whatever it is in your family, to be able to model to them how you effectively manage time on our screens.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, especially with working from home, where there is a tendency, it's really hard to sort of differentiate between your downtime and your work time, and your laptop's always open and your emails are always there on your phone. And it's really hard to say, right, it's 5 o'clock, actually, I'm done, because we don't do that. And as you say, our children are seeing that. Sticking with the teenagers, I've got a lot of friends with teenage children who I know struggle with things that their teenagers see their friends doing and that they're not allowed to do. And I know at the moment some of those things are really coming to the fore, with things like, well, my friend's allowed to go and see, you know, to do this, and my friend's allowed to do this, and my friend's allowed to go to the mall. And mums who are probably a little bit anxious, because obviously children 13 and over can now go to the malls, but some parents say, well, actually, I don't really want you to go to a mall. How are you? That must be hard for the teenagers. I mean, it's hard enough anyway, but with all these sort of additional cans and can't do's, and seeing their friends do things that they can't do it's probably a bit tougher, isn't it, for everyone, parents as well. Masha, I don't know if you've got anything to.
Of course, but I think the parent has just to believe its own compass. You know, of course, that it will be challenging to explain why do you do this and why you forbid this and why you allow this, but you have to trust your inner feeling, and you can discuss it with your child. You can, exchange, you can talk about it, but at the end, boundaries are something that is very important. So I absolutely encourage parents to have their boundaries that, of course, have to be flexible, and teenager has to have a feeling that he can influence the decision, that it is kind of shared decision in terms that he can do something to make it better. But I really think that it is important for parents to stick to their boundaries if they're, of course, rational, if they're not covering for their own inner anxiety, but if they're, based on something real.
Just to add to that, I totally agree with Marsha, and I think the way that you can do that in an effective way is to think about it as empathic limits, so setting empathic limits. And what I mean by that is holding your boundary and explaining to the child or the adolescent that, for me, it's really important that I keep you safe, and physically, I don't think it's safe for you to go to the mall right now. I know your friend and their parents believe something different, and that's okay. But for me, this is my limit. But doing so with empathy and saying, I see how disappointed that makes you. I see how sad you are right now. And sitting with that and naming that feeling will help them to feel understood when you're setting that limit. And that can be a really, for all children, actually, whether they're younger or adolescents, if you do it with empathy and with that support that I hear you, I know this is hard, it won't make them necessarily immediately feel, okay, mum's
mum's right.
But at least they will know you get it and you understand that it's hard.
Yeah.
And that will help them to be able to move forward with the next step.
Do you both see families together as well as children on their own? Catherine, do you see like the whole family in one session? Yeah.
Sometimes it depends. I have what we would call a very systemic approach. So I, in some ways, involve parents or the family in my work with younger children in particular. So sometimes that means seeing the whole family. Sometimes that means working with a teenager, but as and when it feels comfortable for that teenager and important to do so, we might have sessions with the parents as well.
Brilliant. And you, Marsha, are you the same? Do you see the whole family? And
Sure. We tend to keep separate like the family therapy as one form and working with a child as the other form. But when you work with a child, you have like every fifth or sixth session, you have feedback session with parents just to make sure that you're aligned and that you're on the same page. It's a bit difficult when you have teenager because they can see you as a spy for a parent, so confidentiality, and unless they start to trust you and rely on you, and then they learn how you talk to parents, and then they appreciate it. So very often my teenagers will come and say, when will you talk to my mom? Like that happens also, but at the start it's a very fine dance how you manage parents and teenagers in the same time. For younger children, it's more natural. They are expecting that you will be communicating.
Yeah, makes sense. Brilliant. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I guess one of the things that I want to know is guilt. Are we parents damaging our children by them being around us 24/7, or is it all going to be okay at the end of this?
It will be okay. We will get through it.
We'll get through it. Brilliant. It's a crazy time. I lost it with my daughter this morning, who just would not do anything. And you talk to the teachers and they're so lovely and they say, well, it doesn't matter if they don't do it, but you still feel like a failure if they're not even doing one thing. And I just get so frustrated, and I'm sure I'm not alone. There is a large amount of frustration with it all. But yeah,
My view is, whilst it's important to keep structure and to do the homeschooling and, overall, I think if you can help a child get through this pandemic and feel safe and secure, and there is bits that are fun and there are bits that are a bit stressful, but overall there is an environment that has been relatively enjoyable, during that time, then you've done your job. That's what they really, really need right now, because there's a lot going on. So my take is, of course those things are important, but for me the most important thing is their mental health.
I think reality is hard by its definition. It's a job to be hard, and I think that is also the part of our development, because if you don't have hardship, you don't actually have development. So actually very soft and gentle surrounding is not good for us. So I think that this is the opportunity actually to have some different approach. This is something that is happening, we hope, very rare, like this is an event that nobody expected. But it's very important to keep this muscle of adaptability to the reality very alive and flexible and smooth. So I think this is actually a great opportunity to practice our adaptation skills, to practice what do we do in different situations, to practice to function when things are not well, when things are not nice. So these are very valuable lessons. And plus, I think the benefit of just staying at home with children, with families together, that is precious. I mean, of course, this experience is very harsh, especially for some people. But for the people who were actually not being sick or not having direct influence of COVID, this is a precious experience of just being together.
I think that's really important that we remind ourselves that on a daily basis. Yeah, it's precious time that we're getting. I mean, how many times have I gone into the office and said, oh, I'm missing my children do this, or I'm missing them do that. And actually now they're around all the time, so I get to see everything. But that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm sure you have given a lot of reassurance to our mums and dads who are watching, and I really appreciate your time. So I'm sure you're very busy. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Just to reiterate, we would love to hear from you, so please do like, share and comment below. If there's any topics that you would like to see covered or any questions you have, please do comment in the comment box underneath.